Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our afternoon Endless Studios live stream. I'm Brian, and Natalie here has also joined us again. Hello, Natalie.
Hey.
Got a little echo here I got to get rid of. Give me 1 second to kill that. Mute, mute, mute. There we go. Now it's gone. Um, all right. So, welcome again. If you were not with us this morning, welcome to the first day of the Endless Studios pilot program and the first day of our live stream. We did live stream this morning, East Coast time, and did a little introduction to the program. That is available on the Twitch video archive if you would like to take a look at that yourself. You are more than welcome to see what we did earlier. We are going to make a little change to the streaming schedule, and we'll update this on the course page as well. We are going to cut out that morning stream because I think the feedback we got was that was a little early in the day for folks on the West Coast who didn't want to miss anything if we covered it in that stream. So we're going to just go with the afternoon streams going forward, starting tomorrow, Tuesday the 14th. So again, that stream, the once daily 1 hour long stream, will be at 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time, every weekday starting tomorrow, Tuesday the 14th. So on this morning stream, we talked a little bit about who we were and our backgrounds, and we introduced a project we're going to be working on here with you on the live streams, a sort of a developer project that Natalie and I are going to be anchoring, which we're going to get back to shortly. But first, Natalie, I think one of the questions that folks have had is during in general, but certainly during the pilot program, like what's the best way if I'm trying to make progress and I'm working through the projects and the course materials and I'm saving time to participate in the live streams. Like, what's the best way for me to organize my day and organize my learning so that I'm making progress? I'm looking at the things I need to be looking at the right time. So I thought we would start there and give you a chance to, maybe walk us through that. Again, I'll also mention that we will, as always during these live streams, you can chat with us. Please do. Please jump in and chat about what we're talking about or anything that we want, or just say hello on the Twitch chat, which is accessible if you're watching us directly on Twitch or if you're watching us in the embedded version of Twitch that we have on, that we have on the main course page. So jump in and say hello if you're there or ask a question. And Natalie, I thought you could give us kind of sort of the quick overview on, hey, if I'm participating in the course, like what's the best way to organize my day and my learning experience?
Sure, Brian. Happy to do it. So, there's a lot of stuff to do in this course. And I would say if you're part of the pilot program and you want to go all the way through this in the next couple of weeks, I would say you need to spend at least a couple hours a day working on game making. So again, your home base room in the camp would be the classroom. As you know, we have some learning resources there in the classroom. And when you're in there, you'll see it's a very clear um, progression. Brian, it looks like you want me to pop that up on the screen. I can show folks that if you want me to.
Yes, please. Could you bring that up on your screen? I think right now I'm seeing your Never Alone wallpaper there.
Yep, yep. All right, let's check it out now. I can show you guys all the details. I'm going to let Brian pull that up for you and we'll head into the
There we go.
classroom.
Okay, seeing it
Just give
now.
it a second. Yep, yep. All right. So, yeah, again, we've got this progression for you guys here. And the way this is laid out is in units. And what you really need to know about this is there's all kinds of stuff to do in here, and you can just start going through it in order. So you see unit 1 here, it says game design, breaking down games. You have unit 2, and then you'll see over here you have your first project, which unlocks when you complete all of the activities in unit 1 and unit 2. So what I would say is I would try to get this project unlocked in the next couple days. And these activities take a different amount of time depending on who you are. You know, some folks, it's going to take a little while. You got to get things installed. You got to learn how to make an account in GameStar Mechanic. Other folks are going to slide right in there because they have that coding and computer experience. But I would say, you know, getting these first 3 cards here done in the classroom in the next couple days are definitely going to get you on the right track. So let's head inside this unit 1, and I'll give you an example of what's on your plate if you're going through the classroom in order.
Cool.
So you'll hop in here, yeah, and you have a nice little summary here that explains what you'll learn if you do the lessons in this unit. We've got a video here, which I will not click play on this video because you'll see my face talking. And like, I think we would like hop into another dimension or something because like too much Natalie talking in one live cast.
Yeah, I don't think we want to incept anybody on the very first day of class. I think that comes in week 2.
That's right. Yeah, we have a whole unit on like Inception in this. Just kidding. But so you'll see me talking about like, again, what's the point of this unit and what you'll learn here. Just a short little summary to give you an idea there. And then most units have 3 or 4 different lessons that you can complete. So the lessons here, again, this is at your own pace. So we've talked about this in the previous cast, and I'll say it every time I'm on this live cast, Brian. There's no assignments. There's no grading. It's not a teacher thing. This is you in a game studio. And you can imagine this as if you were an intern at a game studio, you still have things you need to learn. But maybe your manager or a coworker who's a little bit senior to you, who you're working with, would say, you know, hey, I need you to learn about meaningful choice in game design. Or I need you to learn how to give feedback on a game prototype. And in that case, you would go off and use the resources available to you at the game studio to upskill, and then you'd come back to your senior person at your studio and say, okay, I know what to do. I'm ready to work on the project. So these lessons work the same way. You're getting some instructions from the other members of the team to go learn, and this is where you do that learning. So you can just click on the open button. We recommend that you go through them from left to right, but you don't have to. There's some nonlinearity here in your learning.
We're very chill about
that. Exactly, yeah, because like, I mean, that's how games are, right, Brian?
Well, I mean, I think it's how many good games are, and it's a concept you'll actually I forget which lesson it's in, Natalie, but if you progress far enough, you'll learn about meaningful choice in game design, and I think it's the same concept just applied to how you might learn things about game making.
Absolutely. So I've actually, I just was clicking on what makes a game, and I've already taken that lesson, so I can't retake it. But I haven't technically taken my own lesson for getting GameStar Mechanic. So I'm going to just show you guys what you would see if you hopped into a lesson. So you'll find yourself on a page that looks a little like this. There are slides to look at, a little text to read at times. In these lessons, you'll find pictures, you'll find videos, and you will find video games. So there are 100% games embedded in these guys. There's a lot of stuff to do. It's not just sitting and staring at a screen and being passive. You actually have to interact with these to go through them. And I enjoy learning that way rather than just, you know, sitting and reading a textbook or watching a really long video, even though at times those are absolutely valuable ways to learn game making. And sometimes we have to, because game making is fun. We never said game making is easy. So
and it's
we're
not.
Here to make
it's one of, yeah. I can tell you professionally, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah. The struggle is real.
The struggle is real.
But I mean, hopefully at least these resources, you know, we're not trying to make it easy, but we are trying to make it a little more fun and engaging than maybe going through a really thick textbook line by line. So,
So Natalie, besides, I think the classroom as the thing that anchors, your learning experience, again, especially if you're new to game making and you want to sort of follow the like the official path, I think is a great concept. But like on a daily basis or a couple times a week or something like that, besides just going through my personal learning progression in the classroom, where else should I be looking? What other kind of stuff should I be looking at? What other uh, rooms in the course should I be visiting, and how frequently should I be doing that?
sure. All right. So, show my screen if you would,
Yep.
and I'll hop us into a couple of other
Yep.
locations.
Your screen is back up now.
All right. So, one thing that I would definitely say for folks to check when they log in here, and I would log in here every day if I was really trying to jam on learning game making. Um, of course, we have the live stream at the bottom of the main page of the course, which, I may create like Inception here for a second. I'm just going to peek it on the
Oh, you're
screen
definitely
because
going to
it's
create
showing
this.
what I,
We're going to
yeah.
get completely. I mean, now we can just implant thoughts in people's brains. This is fantastic.
That's right. So that thing at the bottom is like what we're doing right now, of course, and we'll be on there every day, and it's just a good place to absorb information. So I recommend that people hop on at this time and listen to what we have to say because we're your instructors, we are your senior level coworkers at the studio, and we'll always be here to tell you what's up. In addition to the live stream, there is the break room. And this is an informal social wall contained within this course. So you can see here, I've made a post to kick off this pilot program. It's there right in the middle. And you guys can like, write comments, and make posts of your own here, just like you would do on your wall if you were using Facebook. If you've never used Facebook, no problem. You don't need to understand Facebook to use this. But the point of it is just to chat with us and have fun and get to know the other people at the studio. So you can write something here. The usual rules of being social apply, right? Like be nice, don't type anything totally weird in there. We'll probably just delete it if you do. But you could introduce yourself, and there are other opportunities here. Like if you want to form a game making team and work with another person, you could ask for people to join you here. And we are hoping to post some fun events going on in these couple of weeks. Stay tuned because we're still working on that. But if you check back here, you may have opportunities to play games with us on a server, perhaps, right,
I
Brian?
think that's the plan. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll be posting lots of things that you can just play with and do on here. And we check this every day. So the other aspect of this is if you need tech support, go here and post your question because that gives everyone at the camp, including us, the opportunity to help you. And that's how it works in a real community, right? You're just like, hey guys, I don't know what to do. And everyone's like, oh, we're going to help you because we have a positive culture.
And some people may even know the right helpful thing to say at that time, which isn't always the case, but we're hoping some of us will at some point.
That's
Um,
right.
cool. And then Natalie, in terms of as folks are working on projects, and as we've talked about previously, one of the elements of working on projects is that you'll post a project and look for someone else in the course to play test it. Where does that stuff work? How do I find that? Where should I be looking for that?
Yes. So if you're working on projects and you want to post them to get playtesting feedback or release a game, you would be doing that in the workshop. So I'm going to head here into the workshop, and this is your base for doing game making projects. So you saw earlier in the classroom, you have these learning resources, and then you need to complete projects to continue. And when you hit a project, the classroom will send you here to the workshop and say, choose one of these to complete the progression you're doing in the classroom. What's cool about this is if you are like, oh, I already know a little bit about game making and I don't want to start at the beginning in the classroom, the other thing you could do is you can start in the workshop, pick a project that you want to do, and then when you hit a roadblock, you can go back into the classroom and use those resources to get your skills and tools use where you need that to be. So, for example, you scroll down here and say, oh, you know what? Forget the classroom. I just want to do a level design project. Great. You select one of these and then you realize you need to learn how to install and navigate in the Endless Editor. You can hop back into the classroom and run through the progressions until you hit the information that you need that will teach you how to do that. So overall, while you're going through this process of making games, there is a button right here that says ready to play test that will take you to the feedback board. This is our forum for posting playtesting requests and releasing games. We have discussion topics here for each of the projects. And if you, for example, had created a GameStar Mechanic game, you could click here where it says GameStar Mechanic and then, okay, I'm going to reply and add my game. So this is the area where all of our feedbacking and discussion and game making is happening. And it's also a place I would decide I was probably going to check on a daily basis because, you know, soon we'll start to see games made by students rolling in here that you guys can check out and play.
And you know, I think one of the things we hope you'll learn from the course experience is how valuable that playtesting feedback is to you as a game maker making your own game. So, you know, as Natalie says, as folks start to make progress on their projects and start posting stuff there, please do check in frequently. You know, give somebody else's game a playtest. You'll need playtests on yours. Kind of pay it forward a little bit if you can. As Natalie mentioned, she and I will be on there and playtesting too. So, and I think it'll be a lot of fun because you get to play games and give people feedback on them and tell them what they did right and tell them what you didn't like about what they did. And that's all fun stuff to do. Cool. So, Natalie, thank you for doing that. I appreciate the brief tour there. And again, if folks have questions on that, the break room is a great place to ask those, or when we're live here on the live stream, you can ask them in the Twitch chat as well. So we wanted to go over some of that stuff just to help everybody get, you know, oriented a bit. But we wanted to spend most of our time today talking about the game making project that Natalie and I are going to be doing here in the live stream. So, you know, we hope to have a number of different like threads going on at different times on the live streams, including some playtesting of games when folks in the course are happy to have their game played live before a global audience. But one of those threads, you know, answering questions, talking about topics that you guys are interested in will be another one. So if you have questions or you have topics, again, please post them in the Twitch chat. But another thread that we're going to have is Natalie and I are actually going to be making a game. Specifically, we're going to be working on a game mod. And we talked a little bit about this morning. But I think one of the values of this approach is you get to see how real game makers, and Natalie and I would like to think of ourselves as real game makers, how real game makers work and collaborate. You will get to see a real working game as a starting point, and then we're going to mod it and extend it. And you know, we think that that's kind of a more interesting way to start things than just to start, say, with some design ideas and a blank page, because you get to see all the elements of the game's design, its systems, and the technical stuff already working, and see how those things interact. And then the last big part of it is this particular game we're going to be making and modding in Unity, which is, as I think most of you know, a professional game making tool. And the Endless Mission, one of the tools that you'll use in the course, is really designed to be on a pathway to that. So both like the user interface and how you use the tools to make games kind of stuff, and as we get into the code behind this game, the technical under the hood coding stuff in the C# programming language that both Unity and the Endless Mission use, you'll get a chance to see that, and Natalie and I interacting with that and bringing a design to life, working with the code in C#. Now, we want this process to be interactive. And so we're going to begin and kick off our modding exercise. And we did a bit of this morning with sharing the existing game with you guys and starting to get some feedback and together identify some of the things that we think could be stand to be improved in this game, developing some ideas for how we could do that, and then progressing to actually making those ideas happen as we modify the game. So as we do a little demo here and do a little playthrough, I would love for you guys who are watching to focus on what's working for you, what you dig, what you don't dig as much about this game, and what we could do to make it better. Maybe some ideas will start to form in your head. So let me jump over and bring up the game here. And what you're going to see, again, if you weren't on this morning, is you're going to see the game in the Unity editor environment. So this actually is the full-on Unity editor that we use on professional developers, and hopefully you guys will get to progress to as you continue in the course. And I've got the game up here. This morning, we spent a bunch of time talking about some of the different elements of this interface. You can sort of watch the second half of the video, which is posted on the Twitch channel, if you want to get a sense for some of that. But just as a quick summary, you see two windows here that look like they're showing game stuff. The important thing to know is this bottom window is actually the one that is going to show in a second when we start playing. It's the one that actually shows what you, the player, would be seeing through the eyes of the game's camera while you were playing the game. It's called the game view in Unity. That's the technical term for it. The window up top here is called the scene view. And this is a way, if I interact with this window now, this is a way for me as a developer to move around my game world, look at whatever I want. I can do this when the game isn't playing like it is now. I can do it when the game is playing, like it will be in a minute. And it lets me see and interact with things in the game world other than exactly what the game's camera sees. So those are two terms you'll want to know in Unity. Game view, what you actually see the player sees when they're playing the game, and scene view, like looking at the entire set, if you imagine the game as like a set on a Broadway stage of the game, right? The other thing you need to know, and we also talked a lot about this morning, is that this is a game that was originally designed for virtual reality. And one of the things we'll talk about in the next few minutes is what that means for the design. And as you may have some design ideas, which of those may and may not work, or what challenges there might be in translating some of those to a virtual reality game design. But again, as a VR game, it's a game that would be intended to be played by someone who was totally immersed in the game world, wearing their VR goggles and holding their VR motion controllers and interacting with the game world that way. So Natalie, I'm going to go ahead and play the game. I would love, because it's really hard for me to play and talk, just like it's hard for me to walk and chew gum at the same time. So while I play through, I would love if you maybe could narrate a little bit of the gameplay experience, what's going on, some of the design considerations, and I'll just focus on playing here. And then when I start playing, you guys will see this game window get big, because for now, I just want you to focus on the play experience. We won't worry about all the crazy behind the scenes stuff that you can see going on in these other Unity windows. Sound good, Natalie?
Sounds good.
All right, so let me go ahead and in Unity, as in actually GameStar and the Endless Mission, when you want to go from your design mode and you actually want to start playing the game, there's a helpful little play button, usually kind of right here up at the top of your user interface. And I can click on that and then the game will start playing and loading. I'm also going to unmute the game's audio, so you should hear that quietly in the background too while we talk.
Well, of course, I can kick my narration off by saying that Unity always takes a minute to load the game.
Here we go.
Yep. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things we were talking about, and just go ahead and play, Brian,
okay,
and I'll just talk. We were talking about this idea of, not being able to move, right? Because the reality of the situation that you're in right now is, if you're playing this in VR, you're standing in a room, and you can't easily move somebody in virtual space because there's a disconnect between what you're seeing and what's happening to your body. So, looking at this game, it's sort of designed with that in mind. You stand in one location at one end of this long platform, and then these droids start spawning and coming to try to kill you. So the like design, the basis of this design is very much around standing in one spot. And I always think about that with VR. And again, if you watched the previous video, you heard me talk a lot about that at the end, because I get really nauseated if you're like moving in the virtual world. And I've had that experience in virtual reality games, and it was really negative.
Yeah,
So
it stinks, and there actually is there's a physiological or a biological reason for that, which is, if you maybe some of you have studied this in a biology class, but you certainly may have experienced that if you played a lousy VR game, is when you actually move in the real world, your body gets two messages from two different sources about your movement. One is your eyes, right? So what you see obviously changes as you move, but the other is your inner ear, right, which is where your balance center of your body is, and gives you a sense, sort of an innate sense of when you're in motion. And so the problem with a VR game that creates the kind of conflict that Natalie is talking about is if the camera in the VR game, if your point of view in the VR game visually is moving, but your inner ear says your body isn't actually moving, the way your body responds to that is it makes you nauseous. And that's why badly designed VR games will make you barf. And we don't want that, because there's usually some dry cleaning involved, and that can be very expensive.
Yeah, let alone the computer laptop or whatever.
Yeah, more than just dry cleaning, you may straight up cause an electrical problem with your computer.
I know.
I don't think computers react well to upchuck, so.
So the other thing we talked about at the end of the last cast, and I think we should revisit it, is we talked about why there isn't a HUD. And we asked the people watching if they had an idea of why in this game we do see stats on the inside of that shield that Brian can pull up. And I believe in the VR version of this game, you can press a button on the controller to raise the shield. And in the PC version, you hit the right mouse button.
Yeah,
temporarily.
Or just to be more precise about that, one of the differences, the main difference between playing this really in VR and playing it on the PC in not really VR, which is what I'm doing now in like development mode, is, right now I have my gun and my shield are my two ways of interacting with the world, right? But when I'm playing on the PC, I can only have one of them active at a time. And just as Natalie said, I switch to my shield by holding down right mouse button, which means my shield will block enemy laser blasts, but I can't shoot at the same time. Now, in VR, I have total control over both of those things. And so when you watch somebody play this in VR, in fact, a really good strategy for playing is to keep your shield sort of up the whole time and to sort of shoot around your shield, like hook the gun a little bit around the shield, which is actually probably what you would do if you were in a real world situation where you were being attacked by droids in a sci-fi city. I know that's what I would do. But that's not really a viable strategy in this game.
Yeah.
So I can be deploying my shield, and as Natalie says, you can see below the little viewport in the shield. And in fact, that's why the shield has a viewport in it, because I wanted, when I was designing this game originally, I wanted you to be able to do that strategy of being able to shoot around your shield, but still see through that little viewport. But you can see that's why I have, my stats, my time, my score, my health appear on that little view screen inside my shield.
Yep. And, this is actually a question I would put to the folks watching. And we'll just see if anybody has an idea out there in the world of the Endless Studios Summer Camp and the folks that are watching on Twitch. There's a buzzword, isn't there, Brian?
Oh, there actually is. That's a good. There's like at least a $5 word for the term for a user interface like that. So if on the Twitch chat, anybody wants to comment on why it is you think we've chosen in this VR game to put that user interface on the shield rather than, say, in a HUD. And then alternatively, you could comment on why, if you know the $5 buzzword for the term for when you do that, when you have like the user interface of a game be something in the game world, in this case, like a panel inside the shield, there's like a $5 buzzword term for that if anybody knows it. We will accept either on the Twitch chat.
Right. So if you happen to know that buzzword, now of course it's kind of a nerdy thing to know. Like I feel like there's a subtype of person who watches game studies videos on YouTube who would know this word, but if you're just a casual game player, it's sort of a mind-blowing thing. Like when I learned about this whole concept, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, but I never thought about it until someone explained it to me. So we're not expecting you guys to know, but if someone does know, boop, oh my God,
I would be impressed.
We'll give you,
because
I know, I would be very impressed.
I like you, Natalie. I also did not know this term until I started looking into making games in VR. And one of the things they tell you is your user interface has to be like this in VR.
Yes, exactly. So let's give people a chance to respond and to think about whether or not they happen to know what it is when you show the interface in the world of the game.
Yep, and I'm just gonna keep trying to rack up my score. That's actually a pretty decent score, especially for playing this in. I'm rather impressed. See, Natalie, it does help if you do most of the talking.
Well, I was gonna say I think you're doing a good job of like walking and chewing gum, actually.
And what's my health at? Okay, but I'm down to my last 10 out of 100 units of health, so I'm going to be in big trouble soon.
The one thing I did just want to touch on, and then we'll return back to our interface question, was I think that there is a final aspect to this that sort of caters to a VR sensibility, which is that in this game, it's sort of implicit, like it's hard to just suddenly turn around in VR. Because you have this wire sticking out of your head that's attached to the computer.
Oh, you're saying when you're actually in the VR headset, you mean it's hard to turn around as a real human being, not like in the context of, I gotcha, okay.
Yeah. And so this game is actually built to accommodate that, with the droids are always spawning somewhere in front of you. Now, I've seen this project before, and I know that they don't always spawn in the exact same location. Like, you've coded up this nice sort of randomness to where they spawn and how many come out and so forth.
Yep.
But, they never come from behind you. And in a first-person shooter where you have a blaster like this, you might very well create an enemy spawn that comes up behind where the player enters into a room or a level, and that would be good design. But, here, that's not really productive, because I think what would happen is it would, something would spawn behind the player, it would come up behind you, and you'd take a bunch of damage without even really realizing that was happening. So I think that the sort of oncoming interactions coming from the front are part of the build of this game in response to a VR sensibility.
Yeah, and in fact, the enemy. So first of all, I finally did lose the game there, and got down to no health left. And that's really an annoying sound. Let me mute that again. That's better. So, and you can see up on the screen now that I've lost the game. Again, I got this little, and you saw this at the beginning. I got this little UI window that popped up. And that again, I can interact with my blaster. I could restart the game or hit play. Notice I can't actually, in the way this, and I think this is just true because I'm playing on the PC now. I can't actually bring up my shield. I think I could raise my shield if I were in VR and see what my final score was, but I didn't get to see what my final score was, which I'm rather disappointed at. That makes me sad. Cool. So let me hop out of Unity here. But yeah, so it is possible, and you can see this a little bit. As Natalie says, there are no enemies that can spawn behind me. In fact, there is not much game world behind me at all for precisely the reason Natalie said. But enemies can get behind me, because once the enemies get close, they sort of are programmed to hover around me, and that naturally leads to some of them ending up behind me. Which is not a great place to be in, because they can totally shoot you, and there's no way to protect your back, really, especially when I'm playing it on the PC here with my shield.
Yep.
So that was a little bit of a view of what that game was all about. So I haven't seen anybody answer our UI question yet on Twitch. So let's talk a little bit about that in a general sense, right? So Natalie mentioned this at the outset too. When you're making a game in VR, and I mentioned this earlier on the cast earlier today, there are certain design constraints that come into play, and that's true of any platform you might make a game on, right? Making a game on a mobile phone where you have only the touch screen to input, really means you have to keep track of certain things and do things in a certain way. That's very different than if you're making a game for a game console where your input mechanism is a controller, right? And the same thing is true of VR. Natalie mentioned one of those things, which is that I don't move around in this game, right? I'm essentially stationary. And that is one of the design constraints of VR. Because in VR, when you're working with this VR hardware, and if you read like the guidelines that people like Oculus make for their VR hardware, they will very clearly tell you you can't assume the player can move. And or you sort of have to design as if the player can't move. With this particular VR hardware setup, the player can have a limited range of movement because this VR is what's called this game was originally designed for room scale VR. So the player can have up to I think a 10-foot square space, assuming they've cleared that much floor space in their physical room where they're playing, that they're not going to bump into stuff. They can have up to 10 feet of floor space to move in, but you can't count on that. And in fact, you have to design your games in a way where they could be enriched by having that much space to move in, but you have to assume the player is restricted to being stationary. Now, one thing you can do, again, if you were really playing this in VR that you can't do when I'm just playing it on the PC like I am, is in VR, right, you can dodge and duck a little bit, even staying stationary in the same spot. And so when someone is playing this in VR, the optimal strategy that I've seen, and I mentioned a little bit of it, is not that different than what you would imagine the optimal strategy would be if you were actually, in the real world and getting shot at by some droids, which is to duck down and on one knee and make yourself small and try to stay behind your shield as much as possible and then shoot around your shield, right?
Yeah. I've seen people play this like that when we do actually use the headset. Like people get like this on the ground and
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." Like people get very athletic when they're playing
And you
this.
can, and I mean, if you go a long time in this and you're really being athletic, and some people, try to have fun with it and take it to the point where they're trying to be very Jedi-like and dodge individual laser blasts. You can get yourself a bit of a workout by playing that, and it is one of the things. And this is the other part, right? So there are hard formal design requirements or constraints you get when you're using a platform, right? You can't require that the player move around in VR. And then there are things that they're not hard constraints, but they're really fun play patterns and things you can try to design for or emphasize in your design. And as Natalie is saying, one of those things in a VR game like this is actually getting the player to be active and have that meaningfully affect the gameplay. And you absolutely can have a very fun gameplay experience if you're able to incorporate that ducking and dodging. And so as we think about modifying this game, that might be something we think about, right? Is there a way we could change the gameplay to emphasize that more? Because we know that's really fun in VR.
Yeah, and I've seen some really, really innovative VR concepts that make a big use of that design constraint that's part of using a VR headset. Like I've seen games where like walls are coming at you and you need to go to one side or underneath. If anyone's ever heard of the game Beat Saber, that's an aspect of Beat Saber where you hold the VR controllers as though you're holding lightsabers and you have to chop through these things according to a beat. Sometimes in Beat Saber, a wall comes up and you have to move your body out of the way of the wall, and you have to still hit these like glowing lights to keep up with the song. It's a rhythm game. And I see people play it and they're all just like moving around. And what I always think about that when I see it is we say the word design constraint, and constraint sounds like I've been put in a box. Like, oh, it sucks. Like, I don't want to be constrained. I want to be able to move in VR. And that's actually good that we have a constraint, because when there's something that we can't do, it enables us to then explore how we can, within that box, make it really fun. And I don't know about you, Brian, but I actually have an easier time coming up with a good game idea when there is a design constraint versus when someone comes up to me and says, you can make anything.
I think that's such an important point. I think it's very, very true of games. In my experience, it's true of other artistic areas as well. And that I love the way you describe that, Natalie, because constraints aren't necessarily a box, or aren't necessarily just a box that you're trapped in. They help ground your design process, right? And just like Natalie, Natalie's, not surprisingly, her analysis that she just did is like a super game designer-y analysis, right? A game like Beat Saber, where that uses the physical aspect of VR really well, and then thinking about how you could apply that to a game like the shooting gallery game we just saw, right? I think that's a very designery way to think about that. And when you watch somebody who, and you can certainly find YouTube videos of this, when you watch somebody play Beat Saber at a really high level, there really is something to that. There really is a rhythm-based, athletically based skill set that someone has. And I imagine someone could get better at time over time by practicing that, and that makes it for a very rich design, because it's not just luck, it's not just chance, it's a skill you can develop, and it's one, because it's physically based, we don't traditionally see in video games. It's one of the exciting things about VR as a platform, and so thinking about how we could best use that in making this game design better is absolutely something to think about. And it's funny, Natalie, I don't know if I ever told you this, I have a good friend who is a certified fight choreographer, like stage combat fight choreographer, which is actually a thing. So when you watch, since we're talking about lightsabers, when you watch a Star Wars movie and you see the fights in the Star Wars movie, the actors who've done that have worked with someone who's a fight coordinator, who's almost like a dance choreographer, who helps them develop those fights, and they practice it just like dancers would practice choreography. And when you see somebody do that at a really high level, it's super, super impressive. And even though it's not choreographed in the same way, when you watch somebody play Beat Saber at a high level, it's kind of the same thing.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's like you get to have a moment in that game where you get to feel like you're one of those people in Star Wars and you're doing that choreography. It's so neat. I think it's such a great
Because
idea for a game.
VR has had a kind of a rocky road as a platform, and I think what's going to make VR break out are more experiences, and I think Beat Saber is a great example of one of them, that find out what's let you do things that you can't do in other kinds of games, that just make you feel awesome. Because anybody who's watched Star Wars wants to be a Jedi. You may not admit it, but secretly we know you want. I do. We know you want to. And you get a chance to do that with Beat Saber. And how could we bring a little more of a sense of that? I don't know that we're going to make Beat Saber, right, or make a game of the quality of Beat Saber, because we've got limited time to work on this project. And making a game that's as well designed and well tuned as Beat Saber takes a long time to do, and a lot of trial and error and working on stuff for that team. But capturing a sense of that fun, I think, is something, and increasing it is something we could do here. But let's, Natalie, come back to the hard constraints a little bit, and the question we raised earlier, which is, so all of the user interface in this game is on the shield rather than in a HUD. And why is that? Why is that a choice we made? And believe it or not, it comes down to another hard constraint of VR, right? So, I'll put the question this way, Natalie, since we didn't get any response on the chat, I'll pretend that you are a chat participant who doesn't know this already. So Natalie, I'll ask, maybe I'll put it this way: what is a HUD? Right? If I asked you as a game designer to define HUD, I'll put you on the spot and say, what is a HUD?
So HUD, HUD, stands for heads up display. And when we talk about a HUD in a video game, we're talking about seeing UI elements. UI means user interface. So flat text and images displayed on the screen as an overlay. So when I say an overlay, what I mean by that is the game world is out there. Game world is out there, and it's as though like the glass of the screen that I see the game world through has like a piece of paper stuck to the back of it. And that is what I call UI. And when I arrange that UI in some kind of sort of setup where it gives me information about the game, that's my HUD.
Right. And I think I think that's a perfect definition of HUD. And if I use the example, I'll bring myself up here because I've got an example of just the technique you're talking about, right? If you look at me in this full screen shot, you see me, and then you see this little logo down in over my microphone that says Endless Studios, and that's overlaid. And again, if you ever watch, the news or sports on TV, remember when there were sports on TV? I guess there isn't sports on TV right now. That's
Oh
a
my
bummer.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
when you watch news or sports on TV, they do this same technique. And the idea, the way our brains interpret that, I think both because of how our brains work and because we're used to it by now, because we all probably watch too much TV and play too many games, is you have a screen, you see some world through the screen, the world of the game or the world of Brian talking to you right now. And you see, just as Natalie said, something like this Endless Studios graphic feels like it's stuck to the surface of the screen. And if you think about it that way, that kind of brings out why that doesn't work in VR. Because in VR, there is no screen, right? You are the way your brain interprets that when you've got the goggles on is you're in the game world, just like you're in the real world. And if you imagined looking around the real world right now, wherever you are, if suddenly your health meter popped up in the corner of your field of vision, that would not seem natural. That would be pretty weird. And that doesn't work because, again, in VR, the idea is you are in the world. You're not seeing through a screen. You're seeing the world directly with your eyes, right? That's the whole thing that makes VR interesting and different and work. And that's why a HUD doesn't work. There is no screen to stick it on in the way we can stick the Endless logos or Studios logo and overlay it over the screen like when you see me here. And that means that all of the user interface in a VR game has to be in the world of the VR game. And here comes that $5 word that Natalie and I were talking about before. The word, Natalie, for UI in a video game that is in the game world is?
Diegetic.
Diegetic is the word. And that's like, I promise you there's not going to be a quiz on that. But like, if any of you are going to get a job in a game studio or do a real internship in a game studio one day, if you just throw off diegetic, UI or diegetic user interface, or yeah, I made a VR game, and we really thought about how to make a cool diegetic user interface for now you're you're going to get that job or you're going to get that internship.
That's right.
So really super useful word to know, but all of the user interface in VR games has to be diegetic, right? And you see a number of examples of that in the game that we just shared. One was your health meter, your score, and your timer being on the inside of the shield. The menu system is another example of that, right, Natalie?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It looks, if you actually look at it, and we'll be in that game a lot and you guys will see it. It's like a transparent pane of glass that hovers in front of you.
Yeah, you can even sort of
like
see
an
that.
object.
You can even sort of see that right now if I bring up, not that one, but this one, right? Even in the game view right now, you can see that the game's main menu, the little bit of it that you can see here, it looks like it's on a screen that's been dropped into the world. And if you remember from the play experience, when I interacted with that, you saw that screen, and you did interact with it. And then as soon as you were done with that interaction and you were ready to play the game, that screen disappears. And then you just see the game world. But it really is the case that from the player's perspective, a screen is being summoned into the game world, if you will, while you need to interact with it.
Yep. And Brian, one thing I would add in this is I think, UI is kind of this hidden aspect that people don't immediately think of when they think about making a game. Of course, we think about the droids and the bosses and the collectibles and the environment. But actually, there's UI in like all games, and figuring out how to design it so it fits in your design constraints is a huge part of what you do when you make a game. And, some of it is just putting text on a screen, but there is an art to it, and it's very fun because what you put on the UI can make people feel excited and competitive. Like if I see a timer ticking down. So I really think of it as like a fundamental aspect to making any complete game.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And what it ties into, and it's a good segue into starting to discuss some of the design of this game, is if you think about what the stuff on the inside of the shield is doing, right? There's a timer, there is a score, and there is a health meter, right? And the timer starts counting up as soon as the game starts. So it tells you how long the game has lasted, which is effectively how long you've survived against the droid onslaught, right? The score, you get a score, I think it's 50 points. You get 50 points every time you defeat a droid. So that tells you how well you're doing against the droid army. And then you have a health meter, which tells you how much the droids have been able to damage you. And obviously the game is over when that reaches 0. And that's telling you another way of telling you how well you're doing against the droids. All three of those things are providing you as a player, another important game design concept, with feedback, right? And that ties into sort of my design analysis of this game, Natalie, and it's something you've brought up before when we played this game. And so I'll ask the question, and this is a very common thing that designers will do when they start breaking down a game, but I'll ask the question, how do you win this game?
Right.
Right? And so
Yeah.
if anybody, maybe give a second when we talk about other stuff. How do you win this game? Would be a good question if anybody wants to chime in on the chat, right? How do you achieve a win in this game?
Yeah.
And this is,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
I was just going to say, you guys have seen all 100% of the gameplay for this. So from what Brian showed, you should definitely be able to answer that question. We're just popping it up momentarily here and showing it in Unity with Brian, but it's not like there's another level or another type of interaction. So you would be able to conclude the answer to that question and let us know there in the chat. So.
Yep. And this kind of analysis is something that game designers do all the time when they start breaking down a game that they're making, or when they're playing, sort of critically playing with their game designer hats on a game that someone else has made. It's very common to say, well, how can I win this game? What are the ways that I can lose this game? And those are called win and loss conditions, or the win and loss states, like the state you get into when you play the game. So it's very common to say, what is the win state of this game? So if you take a sport, right, and sports are examples of games. If you take a sport like soccer, football, if you're not in America, what is the win state or the win condition of soccer, right? It's having scored more goals than the opposing team when time expires, right? And you could think about that in this game. So what is and then you can think about loss states too. So for example, in this game, a loss state, or the loss state, is reaching 0 health. As soon as you reach 0 health in this game, you lose the game. But what is the win state?
This question, it's a really good question. And again, let us know in the chat if you figured it out. No wrong answers. It reminds me of a game I made. So before we were online here with Endless Studios, I used to run a couple of in-person youth game making studios. And we had put together a game that was similar to this one, where you had lots of enemies coming and a blaster to take those enemies out. And it was not a VR game, but it had similar gameplay in this way. And we had gotten really focused on implementing the enemies. And we were really enjoying like thinking about their attacks and their movement. And we realized about halfway through the project that we didn't know how to win the game. So we were like, how do you win this? And everybody on the team was like, oh, we forgot to talk about that. And it was a really funny moment because it's so important when you talk about a game to know how you can win, because without that, it's sort of not a game. And, we're not coding right now, right, Brian? We're not doing game development.
Right, right.
But having this kind of conversation about a game, really important before you get in there and start doing things, because you can spend like months working on a project and be like, oh, oops, I don't know how to win this. And now we need to actually change some of the game systems to make it so you can win. So we sit there and we pontificate about games, but what we're actually doing right now is we're cementing our understanding of what this thing is.
Yep. So I see, Natalie, while you were explaining that up in the chat, Javion mentioned, and this is one of the things we want to do in the live stream, so this is great, that he is having trouble with the link to GameStar mechanic in Unit 1. It's giving him a bad link message. So do you still have the course up, Natalie?
I do.
Let's just take a look at that in real time and see if we can troubleshoot it quickly, because I have a feeling it might be a quick one to figure out.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. And I'm sharing. So, Natalie, I'm sharing your screen again now with the two of us in the little windows in the corner.
Awesome. So I am going to pop this back up here and hop in the classroom just so we can see if we do have a bad link in there. This is a pilot, and so this may be some critical play testing that we're getting, right?
It's not impossible that there's a bad link in there. I want to say that right now.
Exactly. So stay tuned, everyone in the chat, and I will hop in here to the GameStar mechanic lesson because we want to get you through Unit 1.
But Javion, thanks for letting us know that there might be a bad link out there.
And yeah, we are getting a bad link, Brian.
Okay, so let's see if you go back into Moodle, Natalie, what that link is actually sending you to. Let's just open that link by itself in a new tab so I can see like the unaltered version of that. Yeah, that's definitely a bad link, Javion. So I think when we get offline here, Natalie and I will update that with the correct link. That's just our bad. That's just an incorrect link we've got set up there. So I think within the next half an hour, you can assume that will be fixed and try it again, and then let us know if it's still a problem after that. But that's our bad. So we are guilty as charged there.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll get the correct link in there, and then maybe, Brian, we could also share it on the break room.
That's a great idea. Yep, let's do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you're Javion, if you're looking for that, you could click on the break room in the next probably 10 minutes, and we'll post it up for you, and then we'll fix that lesson. So if you're in the lesson, reload the page, and the updated link should be there.
Yep. Cool. So we're about at our time for today's live stream. I actually think that turned out to be a good stopping point. So, because I think it's kind of fun to leave folks with the question. So, the question was, what is the win state of that VR shooter game? And I think we'll pick up there tomorrow at, again, 4 Eastern. We're going to just do the one live stream a day from now on. So 4 Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific with that question, and sort of use that as a jumping off point for some more analysis of this game and talking through it. But I would love everybody on the who watched today to, in between now and then, if you're going to join us tomorrow, think a little bit about seeing that game played, and especially imagining it played in VR. What was working for you? What wasn't working for you? What was, kind of cool? What was not so cool? What, if you liked something, what would you like to see more of? Start with that analysis, and thinking about what, you might have ideas for making that game better. And I see Javion, you also just asked in the chat, what's the central time? So it's 4 o'clock Eastern time, 3 o'clock Central time,
Yep.
2 o'clock Mountain time, 1 o'clock Pacific time. So Central time
Yep.
will always be 1 hour behind Eastern, and Pacific will always be 3 hours behind Eastern.
Yep. Yep. And one thing I do for this, I talk to so many people on the online in all kinds of different time zones. If you open Google and you type "what time is it in," it'll show you like in like a big bolded thing of what time it is somewhere, and I always do that. So if you guys are out there and you're like, oh, what time is it in? And Brian and I are on the East Coast, so you could just type New York. You'll see what time it is for us, and you can extrapolate what time that is for you. But we could probably list a few more time zones so you guys know. But I think for Central, it's always going to be at 3 o'clock.
Yeah. And so we also got another comment on the chat from Doomcloud. And Doomcloud, I apologize. I don't know if you're someone who's already in the summer program pilot or you've just found us on Twitch. And in either case, welcome. But so this particular program we're running right now is a pilot program. So this one we're trying to run over the next 2 weeks. So this pilot will wrap on July 24th. And then we expect starting in the first week of August to be offering the program in non-pilot form, or maybe a pilot 2 form. We're not quite sure yet, but running on a more continual basis. So at least, so for the next 2 weeks, we'll be doing these live streams every day. Folks will have access to the learning content as well that Natalie walked us through at the first part of the live cast, and we hope to be offering it for a long time after that. So that is going to be about our time for today. Again, keep progressing through. Think about the design of the game that we just showed. Keep going through the learning content, and we will see you guys inside the learning program, and we'll see you on the live stream tomorrow at 4 Eastern, 3 Central, 1 o'clock Pacific. So have a good afternoon.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.